Today I'm going to tell you the story of a woman who found hope in the ashes of Gettysburg. Elizabeth Caldwell discovered a blood-stained letter that challenged everything she believed about her husband's death in the American Civil War, but no one expected what would happen next. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us where you're listening to this story from. July 5, 1863. The air hung heavy with the metallic scent of blood and gunpowder over the fields of Gettysburg. Elizabeth Caldwell moved between rows of wounded men, her once white apron stained crimson, her fingers raw from washing bandages. The battle had ended yesterday, but death's work continued as wounded soldiers succumbed to their injuries hour by hour. "Water!" a voice rasped. Elizabeth turned to see a young Confederate soldier, barely 20, his gray uniform caked with mud and blood. His eyes, already glazing with the approach of death, fixed on her with desperate intensity. "Of course," she whispered, pressing a dampened cloth to his cracked lips. In the 3 days since the fighting began, she had tended to both Union and Confederate wounded. To her, they were all just boys, far from. The soldier clutched her wrist with surprising strength. "Please," he said, his southern accent thickening as his breathing became labored. "My pocket. Take it." Elizabeth hesitated only briefly before reaching into his jacket pocket. Her fingers closed around a folded piece of paper, sodden with blood at the edges, but the writing inside still legible. "Read it," the young man insisted. "Promise me. You'll find—" His grip slackened as his final breath. Another soul departed from the blood-soaked. Elizabeth closed his eyes gently before unfolding the letter, expecting to find a final message for a mother or sweetheart back in Virginia. What she saw instead is buckle. "My dearest Thomas, I write this from a Union prison camp outside Washington. Tell Elizabeth I am alive. They do not know my true rank or name. For her safety, I cannot reveal more. Find Lieutenant Wilson of the 20th Maine. He knows the truth. Your brother, James Caldwell." May 18, 1863. The letter slipped from Elizabeth's trembling fingers. James, her husband, had been reported killed at Chancellorsville 2 months ago. She had received his personal effects, the official letter of condolence. She had mourned him, had begun the terrible process imagining. "Mrs. Caldwell?" Dr. Hammond approached, his sleeves rolled up, his beard flecked with. "You look as though you've seen a ghost." "I believe I have." Retrieving the letter and pressing her chest. "This soldier, who brought him in?" "Came with the wagon from Seminary Ridge yesterday," the doctor replied, already turning toward another patient. "One of hundreds. Why?" Elizabeth did not answer. Her mind raced, calculating possibilities. James alive? A prisoner? But why the secret? And who was this Thomas that the young Confederate soldier had been carrying a letter addressed to him? "Mrs. Caldwell, we need more bandages in the surgery tent," a harried nurse. "Coming," Elizabeth replied automatically, tucking the letter into her pocket. She would have to wait until her shift ended before she could think clearly about. The day stretched endlessly as Elizabeth moved from changing bandages, administering laudanum, closing the eyes of the dead. All the while the letter seemed to burn against her skin, the fabric of her pocket. By sunset, when she was finally relieved, her mind had formed a fragile plan. In the small room she had been given in a house requisitioned for the medical staff, Elizabeth lit a lamp and read the letter again. May 18th, less than 2 months ago. If James had been alive then, he might still be now. Lieutenant Wilson of the 20th Maine, the regiment that had held Little Round Top during yesterday's battle. A soft knock at her door startled her. Elizabeth hastily folded the letter, and Solomon stood there. A black man had been helping, carrying stretcher and digging grave. Elizabeth had noticed how some of the other nurses avoided him. "Pardon the intrusion," his deep voice respectful, subservient. "Dr. Hammond asked me to bring you." He held out a tin plate with bread and what looked like beef stew. "Thank you, Solomon." He accepted the plate, noticing how his eyes, always watchful, noted her disheveled appearance. Would you step inside for a moment? I have a question." Surprise flickered across, but he nodded and entered, standing just inside the doorway, his posture straight. "You were a slave before the war?" Elizabeth asked directly. "Yes, ma'am, in Virginia. Crossed Union lines last year." "Then you know something of moving through Confederate territory undetected." Solomon's expression shifted subtly, wariness replacing surprise. "I do, though it's not something I care to remember." Elizabeth made a decision. She retrieved the letter and held it out to him. "Can you read?" "I can," a hint of pride in his voice. "My master's wife taught me in secret, said every man should know the word of God for himself. Read this, please." Solomon took the letter carefully, his eyes moving across the blood-stained page. When he looked up, His expression had softened. "Your husband?" "Yes." Elizabeth took a deep breath. "Everyone believes he died at Chancellorsville. I believed it myself, and now you're thinking of going to find him," Solomon stated rather than asked. "I must," I'd simply. "But I don't know how. The country between here and Washington is in chaos. There are still Confederate units all through these hills." Solomon handed his face unreadable. "I'm looking for someone too. My wife and daughter. Last I heard, they were taken to Richmond to be sold. I've been working my way." Elizabeth understood the "We could help you. A white woman and a black man traveling together through a war zone?" Solomon gave short. "We'd be noticed." "Not if I pose as your mistress," Elizabeth said, the plan forming as she spoke. "A sympathetic plantation owner evacuating south with her loyal servant." Solomon's eyes widened slightly. "That's a dangerous game, man. War makes us all players in dangerous games, Elizabeth. I need to find Lieutenant Wilson first. He's with the 20th Maine. Do you know where they're camped?" "Near Little Round Top, last I heard," Solomon said. "But they lost many men yesterday." "They might have moved." Elizabeth nodded. "I'll speak with he can tell me where James is being held." She trailed off, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity considering. "Mrs. Caldwell, there's something else. Consider. This letter came from Confederate. If your husband is in a Union prison camp, why would a Confederate be carrying word of it?" The question hit Elizabeth a physical blow. She hadn't considered that. "Don't know." Perhaps James has friends on both sides. He was a professor before the war. He had students from across the country. Or perhaps, Solomon suggested carefully, not everything in that letter is as it. Elizabeth sank onto her narrow bed, suddenly exhausted, saying only that war makes men do things they wouldn't otherwise do, changes them in ways they couldn't imagine. A cold finger of doubt. Elizabeth's. What if James had changed? What if the husband she remembered no longer exists? "I still have to find him. Whatever the truth is, I need to know it." Solomon nodded. "Then I'll help you find this Lieutenant Will tomorrow. After that," he shrugged his broad shoulders, "we'll see what path opens before us." After Solomon left, Elizabeth lay fully clothed on her bed, the letter clutched in her hand. Outside, the moans of the wounded created a terrible lullaby, punctuated occasionally by the distant sound of a shovel striking earth as graves were dug through the night. James was alive, or at least he had been in May. The thought both elated and terrified. If he had been falsely reported dead, what else is secrecy? As exhaustion finally pulled her toward sleep, Elizabeth made a silent vow. She would find James, whatever it took. She would discover the truth, the mysterious message, and perhaps, in doing so, she would find herself again, the woman she had been before war had torn apart. The letter remained clutched in her hand. She drifted into an uneasy, dreaming of James's face and a long road stretching, disappearing in whisper. Dawn broke over Gettysburg, pale. Elizabeth woke with a start, the letter still clutched in her hand. James might be alive. The thought propelled her from bed. At the hospital, she found Dr. Hammond. "I must take leave today," said firmly. "Family matter." In the middle of all this, the doctor's eyebrows urgent. Hammond sighed. "Half a day. That's all I can spare you." Outside, Solomon waited. The 20th Maine moved camp. They're stationed near the road to Taneytown now. "How far?" 3 miles. I can take you." They set off. Elizabeth aware of the curious glances. A white woman walking. She kept her eyes forward, her back. "Tell me about her family." After Solomon's step. "My wife's name is Hannah. My daughter is Grace. She's 7 now. Smart as a whip." "You'll find them. I pray. The war has changed everything. Lines being redrawn. Some slaves freed, others sold deeper south." The camp of the 20th Maine appeared ahead. A sentry stopped them, rifle raised. "State your business." "I need to speak with Lieutenant Wilson." "Who's asking?" "Elizabeth Caldwell." "It concerns my husband." The sentry eyed Solomon suspicious. "And him?" "My escort," Elizabeth cried firmly. The sentry nodded toward a cluster of officers. "Lieutenant's over there, the tall one." Lieutenant Wilson had a neatly trimmed beard and weary eyes. He straightened as Elizabeth approached. "Lieutenant Wilson? I'm Elizabeth Caldwell." Recognition flickered across his face. "Mrs. Caldwell." He glanced at Solomon. "Perhaps we should speak privately." They moved away from the others, stopping beneath an... "I received a letter," Elizabeth began, withdrawing it from her body. "From my husband, James Caldwell." Wilson's expression remained neutral. "Your husband was reported killed at Chancellor, so I was told. Yet this letter suggests otherwise." She handed it. His eyes narrowed. "Where did you get this?" "From a dying Confederate soldier." "Why? What does it mean?" Wilson folded the letter. "Mrs. Caldwell, I think you should return to the... Forget about "That is not acceptable," said coldly. "If my husband is alive, your husband is not what you believe him to be." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Explain yourself." Wilson sighed. James Caldwell was indeed at Chancellorsville. He was captured there, not killed. But when we processed Confederate prisoners, we discovered something unexpected. Elizabeth's mouth went dry. "What?" "Your husband was carrying Confederate dispatches, Mrs. Caldwell. He was questioned extensively." Wilson's eyes held pity and suspicion. He claimed to be working as a spy for the Union, but his story had inconsistency. "That's absurd." James supported the Union. He believed slavery was an abomination. Perhaps he was playing a role. He was transferred to a secure facility. The last report I received stated he had escaped custody 3 weeks ago. Elizabeth felt the world tilting. James, a Confederate sympathizer. There must be some mistake. The mistake, Wilson said quietly, may have been yours, in trusting him completely. Solomon stepped forward. This letter was carried by a Confederate soldier. If James Caldwell was truly loyal to the Union, why would Confederates be helping him? The question hung. "I need to find him. Whatever the truth is, I deserve to hear it from him." Wilson, too dangerous. "And if you do find him, if your husband has betrayed the Union, you could be implicated. I don't care about the risk." "Where was he being held?" Wilson studied her. "Fort Monroe in Virginia, but that's behind Confederate lines now." "Then that's where I'll go." Wilson disappeared into a nearby tent, emerging with a folded paper. "A pass," explained. "It identifies you as a nurse traveling under Army authority. It might help through Union checkpoints. Beyond that, you're on your own." "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Wilson replied grimly. "I'm probably sending you to your death." He lowered his voice. "There's something else. The man your husband was passing information to. A Confederate major named Thomas Caldwell." Elizabeth's blood ran cold. Thomas Caldwell? His brother, I believe. The revelation struck Elizabeth like lightning. In 4 years of marriage, James had never mentioned having a brother. "That's not possible." Wilson's eyes held no comfort. "War reveals secrets, Mrs. Caldwell. Sometimes secrets we keep even from those closest to us." Elizabeth turned away, struggling to maintain composure. Solomon stood nearby, his face impassive, but his eyes watchful. "We should go, if we're to reach the Taneytown road by nightfall." As they walked away, Lieutenant Wilson called after them, "Mrs. Caldwell, if you find him, be careful. The man you knew may no longer exist." The warning followed her like they walked in silence. "You didn't know about his brother." "He told me he was alone in the world." Elizabeth was hollow. "Just as I was. It was something we shared, no family but each other." He looked up at him. "What else didn't I know?" "People keep secrets for many reasons, not all of them evil. A secret brother fighting for the Confederacy?" Elizabeth shook her head. "What reason could there be?" "I don't know," Solomon admitted, "but nothing in this war is simple. Blue and gray, north and south, the lines get blurred. Your plan to find your family, does it take us south through Virginia?" "It does. Through the Shenandoah Valley, then toward Richmond. Then our paths align, at least for now," Elizabeth said. "I need to reach Fort Monroe." Solomon nodded. "Two people traveling alone draw attention. We need a better story. The Confederates are retreating. Roads will be filled with refugees. What if we posed as a Southern family returning home? It might work." Solomon, "Though no one will believe I'm free if we're heading south." "Then you won't be free in our story, Elizabeth. You'll be my servant, accompanying me back after I came north, searching for my Confederate husband." Solomon's face. I know it's asking me to put on chains. But it may be our both to find your husband and my family." They reached a crossroad. To the north lay safety, Union lines, civilized town. To the south lay uncertainty, danger, and perhaps answer. "We'll need supplies," Elizabeth said, "and different clothes. There's a farmhouse just beyond that rise, abandoned in the fighting." The farmhouse stood empty. Elizabeth found a simple dress, plainer than her own, perfect for. Solomon discovered a wagon in the barn, with a bony mare still in the paddock. "We're stealing," Elizabeth. "Borrowing," Solomon, "to survive." They loaded the wagon with supply, salted meat, hard bread, water. As dusk approached, they set off southward. Elizabeth clutched the letter, her mind swirling with questions. Who was her husband truly? A Union professor turned Confederate sympathizer? A double agent? Or something else entirely? As they passed a ridge, they could see the distant battlefield, now dotted with fresh graves. Ahead lay territory increasingly controlled by Confederate forces, and somewhere the truth about James Caldwell. "You can still turn back," Solomon. Elizabeth shook her head. No. Whatever lies James told, whatever secrets he kept, I need to know the truth. She straightened her shoulder. Even if it destroys me. The wagon rolled on into the gathering dark, carrying them toward a destiny neither could predict. Behind enemy lines, the road south grew more dangerous with each mile. Elizabeth and Solomon traveled by day, their weathered wagon blending with refugees fleeing the battles after. At a creek crossing, they met their first Confederate patrol. "Papers," demanded the sergeant. Elizabeth adopted her Virginia accent. "Elizabeth Harlow, returning to my father's estate near Culpeper." She gestured to her servant. "What were you doing up north?" "Searching for my husband. He was with Stuart's cavalry." Her heart pounded. "I heard he was wounded." "And was he?" "I found his grave at Gettysburg." "Sorry for your loss, ma'am." He returned their forged document. "Be careful. Deserters everywhere." Once alone, Solomon spoke. "You lied well." "Us? I learned from my husband, it seems." That night they camped in a grove. Solomon studied their map. "If we follow the valley, we can reach Staunton in 4 days. Then east to Richmond. And Fort Monroe is beyond that." If he escaped, where would he go? "I don't know any." "Tell me about your wife." Solomon's eyes reflected the firelight. "Hannah, strong-willed, makes me laugh when nothing to laugh about. I promised to return 3 years ago." "You will?" "Maybe. Or maybe they're gone, sold, dead." He looked at her. "Sometimes hope is crueler than despair." Elizabeth thought of James's letter. "Hope is all we have." By afternoon the next day they reached a town where Confederate wounded filled every building. "We should stop," Solomon. "Roads will be impassable soon." The tavern keeper had one room. "For the lady." "Your boy can sleep in the stable," Elizabeth maintained. "That will be fine." The tavern buzzed with officers drinking away Gettysburg's memory. Elizabeth listened to their conversation. "Prisoners being moved south from Richmond." Elizabeth moved closer. "Excuse me, did you mention prisoners? I'm trying to find my cousin, captured at Chancellorsville." A major with an arm in a sling replied, "Union prisoners are being transferred from Richmond. The Yankees are pushing too close." "All prisoners?" "Most have special cases. Those went to Castle Thunder. Spies, traitors, deserters." He studied her. "Your cousin?" "A misunderstanding. He was collecting souvenirs and mistaken for a looter." Later, Solomon knocked on her door. "I overheard something. 2 soldiers mentioned a prisoner exchange. A Union officer for a Confederate major named Caldwell." "Thomas Caldwell? James's brother?" Solomon nodded. "They said he'd been at Fort Monroe. Was exchanged for a Colonel Harrison." "If we find Thomas, we might find your husband. Thomas is heading to Richmond. We need to get there quickly. There's more. They mentioned slaves being moved to Richmond for auction. My family could be among them." They left at dawn despite the rain. The roads were treacherous, filled with retreating soldiers and refugees. On the 3rd day, their wagon's axle broke while crossing a stream. "We'll continue on foot." Solomon pointed to a plantation house nearby. "Maybe they'll shelter us tonight." The Whitfield plantation stood on a hill. A young woman, Margaret Whitfield, reluctantly let them in. Her father was away fighting. Only she and a few servants remained. "Most field hands ran off when they heard the Yankees were coming," said bitterly. Solomon was sent to the kitchen, while Elizabeth received a bedroom. That night, Elizabeth found Solomon talking with an elderly black woman. "This is Nora," Solomon said. "She has news from Richmond." "There's a big auction next week," Nora said. "They bringing slaves from all over Virginia. My grandson works for the trader. Says they got fresh ones from Hampton Way." "Hampton is near Fort Monroe," Solomon noted. "There's more. Soldiers came yesterday looking for a Northerner pretending to be Confederate. Said he stole important papers." "What did he look like?" Elizabeth asked. "Tall man, dark beard. They said he might be with a Negro man, escaped from the coast." Elizabeth and Solomon exchanged glances. "James? With an escaped slave? Did they say where he was heading?" "West, toward the Shenandoah." Nora studied Elizabeth. "You know this man?" "He might be my husband." "Then you in danger, too." They said anyone helping him would hang. At breakfast, Margaret had troubling news. "A patrol came by this morning. They're searching for a Yankee spy. All travelers are being questioned." She eyed Elizabeth. "They're particularly interested in a woman traveling with a Negro." Elizabeth's fork paused. "Is that so?" "They showed me a drawing. The woman looks remarkably like you." "Looks similar, perhaps, but not many claim to be from Culpeper. My cousin lives. There are no Harlow." Elizabeth set down her fork. "I can explain. I've already sent for the patrol. They'll be here within the hour. I need to check on my servant." "He's been detained in the smokehouse?" "Trapped. Elizabeth returned to her room to gather her few possessions. Through the window, she saw soldiers approaching. She had minutes. Slipping out the back, she crept toward. A young slave boy was guarding it. "Please, I need to speak with my servant." The boy hesitated and nodded toward a side window. "Quick!" Solomon's face appeared at the small opening. "They're coming?" "Yes. Can you get out?" "The door's barred from outside." Elizabeth looked around desperately. "I'll create a distraction. When the boy opens the door, run for the woods behind the orchard. And you? I'll meet you there." Elizabeth returned to the house and slipped into Margaret's father's study. Finding his whiskey decanter, she poured it over the curtains and set them ablaze. As shouts of "Fire!" erupted, Elizabeth slipped outside. Chaos ensued as people rushed to fight the flames. In the confusion, she saw Solomon sprint from the smokehouse toward the orchard. She followed, heart pounding. Soldiers who had been approaching the house now helped form a bucket line. No one noticed two figures disappearing into the woods. They ran until their lungs burned, finally collapsing in a dense thicket miles from the plantation. "That was too close," Solomon gasped. "They're looking for us specifically now. We need to change our plan. The auction in Richmond is too dangerous. If they're searching for us there..." Solomon's face hardened. "I'm not abandoning my family. I'm not at..." But James went well. Our paths dividing. Silence fell between them. The partnership that sustained them was fractured. "I'll continue to Richmond." "You should follow your husband slowly. If I find him, if I learn anything about your family, and if I find information about James," Solomon. That night they camped in silence, each lost. By morning they had reached their destination. At a fork in the road they would part ways. Solomon east toward Richmond, Elizabeth west toward the Shenandoah. As dawn broke, they shared their last meal together. "I don't know how to thank you," Elizabeth said. Solomon shook his head. "No thanks needed. We both seek what was taken from us. I hope you find them. And I hope you find the truth." Solomon hesitated. "Whatever it may be." At the crossroads they paused, reluctant to separate. "God go with you," Solomon said. "And with you," Elizabeth. She watched him walk away, his tall figure receding toward the east. Then she turned westward, alone now, following the trail of a husband who had become a stranger, the truth revealed. The Shenandoah Valley stretched before Elizabeth, its beauty marred by wars. Alone now, she moved cautious, adopting the persona of a widow returning to family. 2 days after parting from Solomon, she reached a crossroads. Rain poured out. She nursed a cup of weak coffee, listening to conversation. "What?" "Heard they caught that spy near Harrisonburg," at a grizzled farmer. Elizabeth's hand trembled. "What spy?" she asked, forcing casualness into her voice. "Yankee pretending to be one of ours. Stole plans from Richmond," the farmer spat. "They're bringing him to Staunton for questioning." "When?" the farmer shrugged. "Tomorrow, maybe. Army moves slow these days." That night Elizabeth barely slept. If the captured man was James, she would find him in Staunton. If not, she had lost Solomon's companionship for nothing. Morning brought clearer skies. Elizabeth joined a group of refugees heading to Staunton, safety in numbers against the bands of deserters plaguing the roads. They reached Staunton by afternoon. The town bustled with military activity, Confederate units regrouping after Gettysburg. Elizabeth made her way to the courthouse crowd. "What's happening?" asked a woman, holding us. "They're bringing in a Yankee spy," the woman. "Hanging him tomorrow." Elizabeth, "Has he arrived yet?" "Coming now." The woman nodded toward the street where soldiers escorted a wagon. In the wagon's bed sat a man, hands bound, head bowed. Even from a distance, Elizabeth recognized James, pushed through the crowd, desperate. As the wagon passed, James raised it. Their eyes met. No recognition flickered and confused. Elizabeth followed the wagon to the jailhouse. A captain supervised the prisoner's transfer, checking papers with the escort. Elizabeth approached him. "Excuse me, sir, that prisoner..." The captain looked up impatiently. "What about him?" "May I know his name?" "He resembles my cousin." "That's James Turner, Yankee spy caught with Confederate dispatches." The captain studied her face. "You know him?" "No." Elizabeth. "My cousin is with the 12th Virginia. I was mistaken." "Best forget you saw anything, ma'am. Turner will hang at dawn." Elizabeth retreated, mind racing. James hadn't recognized, or had he pretended not to? And why was he using a false? She took a room at a boarding house near the jail, paying with precious coins from her dwindling funds. After dark, she approached the jail's back entrance. Supplies were delivered. A young guard stood watch, barely 18. Elizabeth clutched her side, feigning pain. "Please," she gasped. "My brother's inside. Our mother is dying. I must speak with him." The guard hesitated. "No visitors allowed." "Just 5 minutes," Elizabeth pleaded, "before they hang him. For our mother's sake." Something in her desperation moved him. 5 minutes, that's all. He led her through the dim corridor to a small cell. James sat on a wooden bench, head in hands. "Turner, visitor," the guard announced, then stepped back. 5 minutes. When the guard retreated, Elizabeth moved to the bars. "James." He looked up slowly. His face was gaunt, bearded, with a healing scar across his forehead. His eyes widened. "Elizabeth?" Disbelief filled. "How?" "I found your letter in a Confederate soldier's pocket at Gettysburg." James closed his eyes briefly. "Thomas, he was to find you. Your brother? The brother you never told me existed?" Pain crossed it. "There's so much I never told you. Lieutenant Wilson said you were passing information to the Confederates." "Did he?" James gave a bitter laugh. "And you believed him?" "I don't know what to believe anymore." Elizabeth gripped the bars tighter. "Tell me the truth. Now. All of it." James moved closer. "I was never disloyal to the Union, Elizabeth. I've been working for Pinkerton since before the war. Secret Service." "A spy?" "When the war began, they needed men who could pass as Southerners. I was raised in Virginia until I was 12. The accent came back easily." "And Thomas?" "My half-brother, my father's son from his first marriage. He stayed in Virginia when father moved us north." James sighed. "Thomas joined the Confederate Army early, rose quickly to major." "You were spying on your own brother?" Elizabeth. "At first. Then I approached him privately, convinced him the Confederacy couldn't win." James lowered his voice further. "He began passing information to me. Troop movements, artillery, a double agent." James nodded. "Until Chancellorsville. We were caught meeting. I was arrested as a Confederate spy. Thomas escaped." "But why did the Union suspect you?" "Because I couldn't tell them about Thomas without exposing him. I claimed I was working alone." James smiled grimly. "They didn't believe me. Sent me to Fort Monroe for interrogation." "You escaped." "Thomas arranged it. Confederate sympathizers among the guards. But something went wrong. I was shot." He touched his scarred forehead. "I lost my memory for weeks. When it returned, I made my way to our meeting point in Andoa. Within Elizabeth, remembering, surprised. "Yes, a man named Samuel. He found me wounded, nursed me back to—" "We traveled together until we were separated near Harrison." The guard's footsteps approached. "Time's up." "How can I help you?" Elizabeth urgently. "Find Thomas. He's in Richmond now." James pressed against the bar. "Tell him Chimborazo Hospital, the doctor from Philadelphia. He'll understand." "James, I love you, Elizabeth. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that." The guard led her away. Outside, she leaned against the wall, overwhelmed. James, a spy, Thomas, a Confederate turncoat. A coded message about a hospital. She needed to reach Richmond, to find Solomon, to find James. That night, Elizabeth sold her wedding ring to a sympathetic widow who operated the boarding house. "I need men willing to help break someone out of jail. And horses." The widow studied the ring. "There are deserters in the men who'd do anything Confederate money." By midnight, Elizabeth had met with 3 hard-faced men who agreed to help for a price. Their plan was simple: create a distraction at the armory across from the jail, then overpower the guards during the chaos. "We move at 4, their leader growled. "Be ready." Elizabeth waited in the shadows near the jail, heart pounding. At precisely 4, explosions rocked the armory. As townsfolk rushed to fight the fire, the deserters attacked the 2 guards outside the jail. In the confusion, Elizabeth slipped inside. The young guard from earlier lay unconscious. She took his keys and ran to James's. "Elizabeth!" James stood shocked. He unlocked his door. "No time," she hissed. "Horses behind the tannery." They fled into the night, riding hard eastward. By dawn, they had reached the Blue Ridge. James pulled his horse. "We need to separate. They'll be looking for a couple. I'm not leaving you again." "Elizabeth." His face was determined. "I must reach Richmond. Finish this. Too many lives depend on it." "Then I'm coming with you." "It's too dangerous." "Thomas will help me. I can reach him." "What about Samuel, the man who saved you?" Pain crossed. "Captured probably, or dead." "He might be in Richmond." "Solomon, the man who traveled with me, went there looking for his family at a slave auction." James stared at him. "You traveled with a black man across Confederate territory?" "People change in war," Elizabeth said simply. "I had to find you." Understanding passed between them. Then James straightened. "Richmond, then. Together. But we travel as strangers. Safer that way." As they rode toward the rising sun, Elizabeth felt a fragile hope. James was alive, his loyalty to the Union intact, but danger still surrounded them. The war raged on, and somewhere ahead in Richmond, Solomon searched for his family while Thomas Caldwell guarded a secret that might alter the course of the war. The truth was still unfolding. Like the road stretching before them, the blood